Good morning. We are in Mitler Rebbe's Maimer. Mi Hashem Elokeinu Hamagbihi Losheves Hamashpili b'shamayim ba'aretz. Close to the end of the Maimer, long 75-page Maimer discourse, and we are on page 431. 131. Close to the bottom. And after explaining the first half of the first verse, Ik Hashem Elokeinu, who is like Hashem Elokeinu, which is what Neshamas Yisrael, Jews declare in this world. Hamagbihi Losheves, as we learned. We elevate all of existence, all the way to the highest levels of the divine, Malchus of Ein Sof, all the way into the Etzem, through our Kabbalus Eil and Torah Mitzvahs and our Avodah. Losheves, where he resides and dwells, is integrated. So then comes the next verse that continues, Hamashpili Lires b'shamayim ba'aretz. Lowers himself, Hamashpili, Lires, to gaze at, to look at, b'shamayim, in heaven and in earth. So that's what we began learning on bottom of page 430, the second half of the verse. Now we'll talk about the comparison, how the Mitler Rebbe explains it, and how the Alter Rebbe explains it in his original Maimer. But for now, let's just continue learning what the Mitler Rebbe is saying. And briefly, he said like this. He brought the pasuk from Tehillim, B'shamayim hibit Hashem, Ra'as kol, V'mochin shivtei ishgiach al kol. Basically, two verses, excuse me. And he explains, which of course can explain many verses. When we talk about God looking at the world, gazing at it, being mashgiach, supervising, guiding it, directing it. So there's the first verse refers to Yediyah Klolis, meaning an all-encompassing gaze or view that includes ration safe. Everything is like one picture, one snapshot, one bird's eye view. Yediyah Klolis, and then there's Yediyah Protis, where he goes down into the very details, so-called on a ground level. And he's going to explain that Hamashpili b'shamayim, in the verse, Hamashpili Lires b'shamayim, is referring to the higher perspective from the Shamayim. Well, ba'aretz is as God sees things through Das Tachtin, the lower perspective. In other words, immersing itself in the details. And both obviously are necessary. And he explained, the first is skira achas. Everything is like one look, one overall overarching or one all-encompassing look. And the which is b'shamayim hibit, oris erein sof b'makiv hakloli. Just looking at all the language here. The makiv hakloli, the central, all transcendent energy that encompasses everything, like an eagle, like shamayim. And the way the hashgacha is providence and the supervision of on earth and everything that is inhabited on earth is b'yediyah klolis hamakefes b'cholos kol shenimshich meses fiz datzilis. And then he says hamevin is called ma'asehem. He understands and discerns all their behaviors, all their actions, all their activities. And that's Yediyah Pratis, which comes nimshach from the Yediyah Klolis, like a prat that comes from a klal, like the details that start emerging from the overall picture. Einechab kuches al kol darkei bnei adam. I call all the comings and goings, all the affairs. That's the word I was looking for. All the human affairs, the pratis. Okay. And he says, these are the two days, Das Elyon and Das Tachten, Yediyah Klolis, Yediyah Platis. And now he goes on and says, now how does it work exactly? Well, based on that, it seems like two different perspectives Obviously, there are perspectives on the same reality, but one is a all-inclusive one, and one is details. She says, "Bavade kasher nitvis b'yediyah pratis." When and it's certain when a person is moving, let's say, from the 50,000-foot level. I gave yesterday the example, a supervisor that's looking at the whole team working from so-called from above. So bavade, when he's goes now into the details and starts evaluating not just the whole team, but each individual and every detail of the work detail, Yotzamin Ayidiyah Klolis. He's moving away from the big picture and is moving into the small details. And he calls that Yidiyah Pratis, which is the difference in Seviv and Mamala, Seviv, which is higher than, and Mamala, which manifests within existence. However, when it comes to the Eibishter Hashem, we say something, a new thing here. Not just that there are two perspectives, but that there's one, they are both it's united in the sense that as he is contained and finds the nitfas b'kul alman and is manifest within existence, at the same time, existence cannot contain or define him. Nitfas ve'ena nitfas. So the same is true with these two perspectives, these two yediyas. The gambi yediyah pratis eina nitfas b'zeh, that even when he gets engaged, involved in the very details, he's not defined by it. Ve'ena elam mekemei. So beis yediyas halolu, the klal prat einam beis hofchem klal, they're not two opposites at all. The einam muchach lema the kasheru biyediyah kol is einam malubish befrat. And we don't have to say, like we said before, the way it is by us humans, that when he's involved with the big picture, he's not manifesting in the detail. Ukashu befrat einam b'makif. And when he's involved in the detail, he's not looking at the big picture, but both at the same time. He's able to combine both at the same time. Because he's higher than both of them, and therefore they're both equal by him. The das takten from ma'ayin to yesh, and the das elyon from yesh to ayin. Because everything is everything is nullified in the presence of doesn't say atzmus here, but it's talking about the Eibush that's above it all. The kolza inyan yediyah klolos ba'pratis ein shaykh v'ak b'chinas ishtalshlus. Only in ishtalshlus do we talk about that actual distinction. There you can speak about a mokar kloli and prati, a general source, and then a specific source. And everything comes, for example, when you say everything comes from the water is coming from a reservoir. So that's in general, but then it breaks down into specific pipes that go into each home. So that's the prati. That's all in ishtalshlus. Mashenkin ba'atzmus ein sof shalamayla memokar ishtalshlus. He's higher from even being called a source for ishtalshlus. There, they both join as one. They're all one fused as one reality, one God looking at existence. And there's two aspects to it. And then he gave the example in the parentheses of Navei Yosef, who while he was in Mitzrayim and he was an accountant, like he says, Mona de Chushban, he was busy with the Ksav Chushban and with the accounting and the how differ, how you dovuk lamaila, attached above the Yeshishosh lamaila min ishtalshlus, completely attached, because he came from a place that was higher than the accounting and higher than even that which is beyond the account, meaning higher than the Ruchnius. And when you come there, you can have both of these realities can come together as one. And that's where we stopped. Oh, actually, no, a few more lines, sorry. He said like this, V'zeu sh'omar, went back to now Hamashpili Losheves b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. So, what's Hamashpili Losheves? That it descends downward to look at Losheves. In Shamayim hibchinis yediyah klolis, Shamayim hibit. Uba'aretz is yediyah pratis, Ashgacha pratis, Bereishis Losheves. So by him, you say Hamashpili Losheves b'Shamayim v'aretz, it's all equal. Just like we said earlier that it's all equal. Hamashpili Losheves b'Shamayim v'aretz, he doesn't distinguish that he looks at one differently than the other. So even these two levels of Shamayim and Aretz, from the Eibishter's point of view, they're all one perspective because they're all united as one, like he says. Hakol roya b'ashva achas. He sees them all equally, the prat and the klal, the and shemaim and eretz. Lefi shesevel beis day tohavchim alol metam shemushlu mechol ikur u'makar yishtalshlus the seven malish and nikra shemaim v'eretz b'chlal kiyudua. And then the last few lines we learned was v'zeu the gam Hamashpili leaders b'yerida v'shivlos mamay lamata v'chnei rei b'shamayim v'oretz b'shava mamash. So in other words, it's not just that the way Abish to Hamagbihi Losheves that there everything is equalized, but even as he descends, so to speak, the descends. Look at oretz, which are two perspectives, and das tafstin. Even as he comes downward, he sees them equally, which is even a bigger chiddush. To say the Eibush himself sees it that way is one thing, but he sees it even as he comes down, which means ultimately that we can also learn from that and experience it, because of course Hashem is sharing with us how He sees things. I was thinking about it from a purely business management perspective. Can you learn from this? Three types of management here. You have people, for example, manage a company, a team. So they're very good at details. They know how to manage each individual, but they may not be excellent at coordinating. When you have everybody working together, they're very good at the human resources level of each individual to help them, train them, and do their job well. Then there's someone who's very good at bringing them all together, like the Yediyah Klolis. Let's see how they all complement the mission of the organization. And then the third would be someone who knows how to do both. That even when you're talking to a detail of one team member, it's informed by the bigger picture, because you're coming from a place that's beyond the bigger picture and beyond the small picture. There's something about the vision that you have is so powerful that it permeates in a seamless way between the klal and the prat. So I was thinking that you probably could develop from this different ways of management, and they're all needed, because you need the details, you need the overarching vision, and then you need that vision that's beyond that overarching vision that combines the klal and the prat, the all-encompassing picture and the details. So just thinking about it, if this can be applied in a practical way, I'm sure it can. Obviously, it's only an example. It's not comparable to Atzmos when you say that both deis, he's saved both deis, nitfis ve'ena nitfis, is of course a far higher level. But still, you could find examples for it in our own lives. And you see this all the time. You see, for example, even when you're, let's say, mediating or advising people, let's say a couple that's having challenges, and you hear each of their opinion. So it's important to understand each individual. Then it's important to understand how they're a team. And then there's something, how do you integrate the team part where they complement each other, where the part that they're like one, while also respecting their individuality. So it's not so simple, because sometimes individuality gets in the way of the general, the greater good, so to speak. So combining the two can really be an interesting exercise, and maybe you can learn from here. So something to develop. Just wanted to throw that out there as an example. In Avodah, we have, of course, the example of Yosef that we've learned. Like I said, there are people who are more ascetic in their lifestyle. There are people who are more immersed and engaged in life in the material world. And then there's the combination, like by Yosef, that while he's engaged, he also remains above and beyond. Okay. So that's a summary of what we've learned. And maybe anybody wants to ask anything?
I have a quick question, if it's okay, please.
Sure.
It's more technical in translation. It's understanding too. About 10 lines up from where we're holding, where it's the line that begins with Hulu, just a chaf vav. The kol zeh ha'inyan b'yedei ha'klas v'apratis eino shach rak b'bchinas ha'ishtalshelus. I don't understand. He's saying these two perspectives, a general skira and a more detailed hashgacha, they don't relate to each other only except in the sense of the cosmic order, the Seder Ishtalshus. I know I'm not translating it correctly, but
as two separate entities. There's two separate entities. that these two separate perspectives that he said that when you move from the klal to the prat, you have to leave the bigger picture to go into the smaller picture. That's in the shtalshlus. They're two different perspectives. And therefore, it's only shtalshlus. Ozi taken, that's where you can speak about a makar klali, a makar prati. Avol, if you read on, Mashenkin ba'atzmus seid sof, that's higher than being a makar altogether. They aren't really two, they're one.
Understood. Got it. Thank you. I was having a hard time getting that. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. So let's continue. We're at the 2 lines from the bottom of page 431. Pages can be found at ayambeis.com. So he says like this. You're now going to bring back, okay, this is Hamashpili Losheves b'shamayim u'ba'aretz. What's the connection to Hamagbihi? So he says like this. Atam de Hamashpili Losheves b'shava. The reason that when he comes downward, meaning Elikus is descending to look at heaven and earth, and it looks at it equally, like we just said, the reason for that is Mishum, because the Hamagbihi Losheves. Because Atzmus, or his highest levels of Elikus, are in a state of Hamagbihi Losheves, like we spoke earlier, Hamagbihi, all the way to the highest levels, Losheves, like Yeshiv Augustus, that he's in an integrated state. So he says the Hainu, which means Shema'eshe Mokim the Atzmis Ein Sof. Remember, Hamagbihi Losheves was that he's sitting on the throne from his Mekeme HaAtzmi. We're not talking about him coming down. It's not Mashpili. It's not coming down and sitting on a throne that relates to existence, the throne of the king as he relates to his subjects. But we're talking about the so-called the Kisei Elyon that he calls in the Helam Lamaila, all the way up Lamaila, where Stima Dechol Stimin, as he called it, and Atzmis Ein Sof. Shemagbihi Losheves, that was elevated for him to reside, dwell there. Where? But Malchus the Ein Sof, Shekedem at Tzimtzum. From to Malchus of Ein Sof, that's before the Tzimtzum, that's what we reached through our Aveda Hamagbihi Losheves. Next page, 432. L'ishtalshlus. That is coming from the Malchus Ein Sof Shekedem as l'ishtalshlus to Losheves. That from that very place, he comes downward into ishtalshlus. Misham dafke Mashpili. So the Mashpili is not coming out in a vacuum. If there was no Hamagbihi Losheves, then the Mashpili, you could argue, is the divine energy that comes after the Tzimtzum. Simple. That the divine energy comes down Mashpili, Hashpala v'Yerida. It comes in a state of descent. It gets diminished. It gets concealed in order to create a kav, a chut, a thin line that will create existence. So in other words, it's commensurate and tailored. It's the divine that relates to existence. But the fact that it's coming, but it's not the case. We're not talking about Hamashpili on its own. We're talking about Hamashpili that follows because of the Hamagbihi Losheves. We're talking about his highest levels. Misham dafke Mashpili, from that Mokim Atzmi. From there, it's Mashpili be'er Yoshar, Lires ulashgiach be'ishtalshlus. That from that highest place, there he's coming downward in an Er Yoshar, which we know, instead of, not like Er Chezer, which is the bottom up from Aveda, from below up, but coming downward to lires, to gaze or to see, ulashgiach, and to supervise, or to oversee, or to providence by shtalshlus. Shenimsha b'chlal u'b'frat shenikra shemayim v'aretz, and transmitted in the klal, the dasalian klal of shemayim, and the prat, which is the specifics, which is aretz, shemayim v'aretz. Al kein reish shrei b'shnei b'shava. That's why he sees them both equally. What I think he's adding here is that it's true. Mashpili Losheves b'shamayim v'aretz, we already explained, sees them equally, but you could make the case, if the person didn't say Hamagbihi, you could say it's only talking about the divine as it relates to existence. In existence itself, das elyon, das tachten, meaning Shemayim and Aretz. But now it all starting is Mishum Hamagbihi Losheves. Mika Hashem Elokeinu is supposed to be we read in one flow. Mika Hashem Elokeinu, who's like Hashem Elokeinu? Hamagbihi Losheves. We're talking now, elevating through our Aveda all the way to the highest levels, elevating the Yud all the way to Malchus of Ein Sof, Lifnei Tzimtzum to Rebos HaAtzmis what he called earlier. And then he continues, Hamashpili Lires, that same Hamagbihi is now coming downward, Lires, to look at Shemayim V'Oretz, the Klal and the Prat. And that's why he sees them both equally. In other words, you could argue that even from a divine point of view, there is two ways God sees existence. He could see it through our eyes. He could see it through his own eyes. That's not a problem to say that. However, we know in Atzmus it's not that way, because in Atzmus you can't split the Atzmus into two. You can't see it as two perspectives. You could say in the Shtalshlus there's two perspectives. Fine. Just to drive the point home a bit more. I mentioned this several times. The Gemara says that zivug, marriage, is kosher k'kriyas yamsuf. It's as difficult as parting the sea for Hashem. So Chassidus asks the question, Mittel Rebbe actually, what do you mean? For God it's hard to part the sea? For us it's hard to part the sea. Why is it kosher? Why is it difficult? The Eibishter created land, he created sea, he created all the rules, he created the laws of nature, so he wants to suspend them. What's the big thing? So the Maimorim, the Chassidus answers, because Hashem created these laws are not just arbitrary laws. These are his laws. He did it. And he binds himself to these laws. So of course he could suspend, but he doesn't. And even when he does a miracle like Kriyas Yamsuf, you see he does it also as much as possible within nature. He sends a wind. The wind causes the water to rise on both sides like a wall, and they walk through it. The Eibishter could have found a lot of ways for them to walk through the water without having to use winds and so on. So my point being is that even the Eibishter, so to speak, reckons with and considers, say, the Ishtalshlus, because it's his Ishtalshlus. He's not bound by it, and he created it. Like we said, he's not tough Izbit, but he's definitely created it. It's his rules. It's not following our rules. It's his rules. So in that sense, you could speak about God seeing things from our perspective, from his own perspective. And you could say, Atzmus, the part where they both come as one, is not accessible to us. I mean, you could make a theoretical argument like that. Chassidus, as I point out many times, especially when we learned Ayin Beis, throughout Ayin Beis, that Chassidus wants us to have everything. That the Eibishter wants to give us not just a divine experience on our terms, but also a divine experience on his terms. And when I say his terms, I don't mean just his perspective versus our perspective. That's still Das Elyon. But a place where his perspective and our perspective become mamish like one. Mamish like one. I remember once giving a workshop on marriage and love and relationships. And I was speaking, it was people of different ages. There was some younger people, there was some middle-aged, and some older people. There was one couple sitting there, and they were just like, you could see their sweethearts from who knows when, probably married 70 years or something like that. And they were enjoying it. And you can see they were probably, of all the people in the room, most in love. So anyway, I was saying that, a relationship obviously has elements to it. There's like I mentioned before, there's the individual. Each person has their individuality. Remember, they weren't born together. Born in different families and different homes, different opinions, different perspectives, different cultures even. Then two people come together, and they're in many ways opposites. They're not even, they don't even have anything in common like a brother and a sister does. And yet they come together, and if it's a healthy relationship and a loving one, they join in a point that's even deeper than even siblings. There's a very profound connection. So what happens to their individuality? So some will say, okay, it's compromise. I don't care about my individuality. I love this person. I forgo all my personal interests. We know that's not a full relationship. A relationship means, like we say in the morning every day in Shachris, we say, Shnei ksuvim hamakishim zeh zeh, the two verses that contradict one another. Then comes a third verse, and machriya reconciles, harmonizes, synchronizes. So Chassidus explained, it's not that the third verse is negating both those interpretations. It's found a third way, a synergy, that both interpretations can work together. Classic example, just to drive the point home. I remember when the Rebbe spoke about it, beautiful. One of the classic contradictory psukim is when one pasuk it says that Hashem spoke to Moshe, ben shnei badei ha'odin, between the two poles, the two rods of the Holy Ark. That's where the voice of Hashem came. In another pasuk, it says that God spoke from Pesach Oyel Moed, from the door of the sanctuary. Oyel Moed, of the, what do they call the Oyel Moed in English? The courtyard. The Pesach Oyel Moed, the courtyard that connects the Migdash, the Mesa Migdash to the outer dimension. So it seems like a contradiction. Where did the voice come from? In Parsha Nosei, he comes and says the voice
Oyel
started.
Moed is the courtyard.
Huh? What?
Oyel Moed, I think, is the mishkan, not the courtyard. I think.
Oh,
Oyel
Moed
Moed
is tent of the meeting.
Tent of the meeting. Sorry, my mistake. I meant to play Pesach Oyel Moed, where that tent of the meeting meets with the outer, the doorway there. So Rashi says, at Parsha Nosei, what's the reconciliation? What's Kosav Ashlishi? Kosav Ashlishi is the voice originated from the Odin, from Beis Shnei Badei Odin, originated from the ark, but it traveled and came out through the Pesach Oyel Moed, and that way others could hear it, and so on and so forth. Okay, so remember the Rebbe speaking is saying, why did the pasuk have to do it that way? Why did the pasuk Chatchila just say that? Why do we need to have one pasuk says from Shnei Badei Odin, another pasuk which seems to contradict the first one that's from Pesach Oyel Moed? The pasuk could have said it comes from the Shnei Badei Odin. Why do we need 3 psukim to drive this point home? Good question. And the Rebbe's answer, which is very fitting to what we're learning here, the Rebbe said because there's a mile in each one. When it's coming from Shnei Badei Odin, it's more on God's terms. It's in Kodesh Kodashim, in the Holy of Holies, and it's in the Holy Ark, and nobody's allowed in there. So there you have an undiluted preservation of the integrity of the original voice of Hashem. On the other hand, the Pesach Oyel Moed is more on terms of the listeners. It's already traveling outside of the Oyel Moed to be heard by others. So it's like more the teacher relating to the students. And since you want both milas, that's why there's one pasuk focuses on how from Hashem's perspective. Think of the first one as Das Elyon. The second one is more Das Tachten. It's also Hashem speaking, but speaking me Pesach Oyel Moed. And then comes the Kosav Ashlishi and says, you know what? Both are really one. The same voice is going through both stages. I'm not saying it's exactly what he says here, but I just kept in mind. So you see from this that there's actually, you want to have, you don't just go and say, enter Atzmus, everything is one. We want to have a Seder Shtalshlus. We want to have a structure with this Tachtenim and there's Elyenim. There's a Pesach Oyel Moed, there's a Odin, Shnei Badei Odin, and then there's the voice of Hashem in each dimension, and then you come Kosav Ashlishi. So going back to what I wanted, the story I was saying, so the real marriage, a real loving relationship is not only that you compromise your individuality because you love each other so much. On the other hand, you have to have an element of a synergy, because if 2 individuals just do whatever they want, they will never have a union. They won't be partners. And yet we find a place where they become literally like one. So let me tell you what happened here. The woman of the couple, this older couple, they're probably in their 80s. She stands up. She said, we had our disagreements through our life. We had our arguments. But you come to a point when you really love each other that not only don't you compromise your individuality, you come so much one with the other that you can actually know what they would think. And very often what happens is, I don't need to say my opinion and he says his opinion, and then we figure out how to reconcile. I know his opinion and he could say mine, and we represent the other even. You become so much, so not only didn't we lose our individuality, we even appreciate each other's individuality. So it's interesting because I'm thinking again in terms of, you have the individual, Das Tachten, you have Das Elyon, where everything is like one, but then you have a combination of joining together. Another Chassidus applied, if you wish. Before I spoke about business management, now we're talking about marital harmony. So I think you can apply it here as well. So bottom line is, so the Hamagbihi Losheves leads to Hamashpili Lires, that even when it comes down into Hashpola and Yerida in Ishtalshlus, where there are Rei B'Shnei and B'Shava, because it's exactly like the same thing as a Hamagbihi Losheves from the top higher level. That is okay. Let me stop here for any questions before I continue.
This is a technical question.
This is
Um,
actually, uh,
Sorry,
no, I was just going to say, it's quite beautiful, I think.
it's phenomenal. My technical question is, we have this general vantage, if you will, or hashgacha, and this more particular pratius hashgacha. The technical question is from where are these gazes in the Seder Hishtashalis? In other words, where does, because when we talk about the Seder Hishtashalis in its fundamental structure, like it's Hamagbihi and base earlier, every level is like an infinite leap. So every level, if you go down, is an infinite leap down. So where does general become particular? Do you understand the question? I know it doesn't. It's technical, but when we talk about the Seder Stashes, often in general, pardon the pun, we talk about each level is like infinite levels of tzimtzumim. And yet, when we're here talking about hashgacha, we're talking as a general hashgacha and in a particular hashgacha, which is different than saying each level is an infinite leap higher or lower than the other.
You're asking me where, as in like where the geographic location of this happens?
No, conceptually, is it like above Atzilus is Klali and
everything is
everything
is relative. Before the Tzimtzum, we say Erin Sof Hayim Amala Kol HaMetzias. There was only divine consciousness, a total seamless unity. The Tzimtzum concealed that, so therefore create a kav and his chalkus. You start having structure. The kav has higher and lower. The line, it's not a circle, it's like a line, and starts creating hierarchy. As you go downward, this happens. It's like asking the question when a child is conceived, at what stage does it start breaking into details? It's happening through all 9 months. First, the cell splits into 2, then into 4, then into 8, and then into 16, 32, 64, etc. And then the first trimester, second trimester. Histalsalus is a process that's going from a seamless unity into structure. In Atzilus, you have 10 spheres, and then a Bria, you have the next level. I mean, it all comes down to, in this world, obviously, we see it in a very physical form, in a sense. So everything goes from unity. I mean, this universe itself is a unified, integral whole, but then it also has the specifics because we don't see that underlying unity. But we all know it's connected. Everything's connected. Like the human body. Human body is a unit, one organism, or is it made up of many parts? The answer is both. The parts all work together as one body. So it's not a question. I mean, it's just that's the process of how you travel from unity to distinction.
Oh, that I understand. I think I asked the same question. And hold on one sec, please, Rabbi Teichel. I think I asked the same question on Hamagbihi Losheves, and I think you said that the line, if you will, the sort of between the Klali and Prati was Ak, that pre-Tzimtzum and post-Tzimtzum. Is that still holding true for Hamashpili Liros?
You're asking now a completely different question. You asked me, I thought you asked, where does it move over from Klal to Prat? That's what you asked, right?
I did.
So I explained that's happening throughout Hishtalshalos. For example, when you go from Keser of Atzilus, the Rotzen for Atzilus, to the Spheres of Atzilus, Chochmah, that's already Klal to Prat. From Chochmah to Bina is Klal to Prat. From Moichin to Midas is Klal to Prat. The whole Hishtalshalos is going from a more general to a specific. If you're talking about throughout Hishtalshalos. In general terms, I spoke before the Tzimtzum and after the Tzimtzum. I mentioned yesterday that Skira Achas, what he said before, like when you look at everything one gaze, in some places, here he doesn't say it explicitly, but in some places, that's the world of Adam Kadmon, the blueprint, where you see the whole existence in one snapshot. That's sometimes Adam Kadmon is that level. But the truth is, Klal and Prat can be applied anywhere. Like Kesser looks at things from a Klal. He said the word save of Klal and Mamala Klal. Where's save of a Mamala? Everywhere. Every world has a seivav and a mamala. And then there's the seivav hakloli, what he called the makif hakloli, on top of, we spoke about the makif hakloli, where was that? At the bottom of page, right here. page 430 on top of 431. Makva kloshakel kol ishtalshlus. Makva kloli sometimes is ak. It could also be the igul hagadol. The different ways. He didn't spell out exactly the place because it's understood in general terms. It's like, in other words, like I said before, the supervisor looks at the whole picture, or he's looking at the details. Okay.
Thank you.
I think that this point that you said, it's even higher than Machshava, the Rotzon. I don't know, maybe even higher than Helem Atzmi, because the bottom, like you explained it, the bottom line is it's above all of these things what the kavana pnimis of everything is. So you have the klal of prat in everything until Atzmus. Until.
That's fine. I mean, it when it comes to Chassidus, it's very different. I mean, this is in general Atzmus higher than the Shtalshlus. But Atzmus itself is Atzmus Atzmus Ha'oyer. He called it before Erein Sof Ha'atzmis, Reimamus Ha'atzmus. There's different words he's been using. And yes, you have to say it's a place that's higher than Das Elyon and Das Tachten for sure. That's clear. But the question is, where's Das Elyon and Das Tachten? Is Das Elyon and Das Tachten is already two perspectives even before the Tzimtzum. You have Yecholte Lahoyer, Yecholte Shaloi Lahoyer. You have the Oyer Kedem Aleis HaRotzen and Oyer Megalis La'atzmei, the Oyer Shaykh La'ilimus in the Rebbe Rashap's terms. So yes, he's definitely talking about a level that is beyond Milo Mata, Emek Reim, Emek Tachas, higher than Dasa and Das Tachna, higher than Yehudi and Lo Yehudi Tata. Correct. So I'm in agreement.
So he's saying that Rabbi
Thank
Tachtel
you.
saying Rabbi Tachtel was saying that the klali is at that higher level where there's no distinction at all.
No, the klal is the klal and the prat are already two levels. We're talking about a level that's higher than klal and prat.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Maybe even higher than oil, Ein Sof. Atzmus oil, Ein Sof, because oil is not an entity.
Yeah, but remember, etzema oir is kodem kekadmusei. So if you want to go there, it's not so poshut because if etzema oir, the highest level of oir is where it's kodem kekadmusei kol batzmusei. You could say that oir carries this element of this unity. I don't know if we can conclude this because we would have to go, I think, to Ayin Beis. The Rebbe Rashab would speak about it more in that language. Maybe he'll say more. I mean, for all our practical purposes, I've said a number of times, when we say Atzmus, do we mean Atzmus, or do we mean Atzmus as we speak about Atzmus? It's already not Atzmus Mamish, as the Rebbe Rashab says in Teira Shalom. It's Eir Ein Sof, Etzema Eir. But bottom line is, it is a level that is... Remember, in the earlier Chassidus from the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, that language of Etzema Oyer and Yechelis is less used. The Rebbe Rashab developed it a lot more. So here, I'm careful. I just will say it's higher than Das and Das Tachten. How deep it goes, whether it's higher than Helem Atzmi or not, maybe it is Helem Atzmi, maybe it's higher than Helem Atzmi, I don't know. And I don't want to speculate without it saying it befedish. So let's see. I have patience. My approach would be, let's learn everything that he says. We'll go back to Ayin Beis and let's see if we can how we can figure out exactly, because there's still more to talk about. Einoid, we know goes. There are things in the Maimorim that speak clearly what is Helem Atzmi. So we have actually sources. The Neshamas are rooted in Helem Atzmi. The Kalim are rooted in Helem Atzmi. So once we can tie it all together, we can then perhaps figure out where this levels that we're talking about right now belong. Like, I mean, if you really want to start Chkireven, you can start asking the question, is this the level of built-in Metzias Nimtza, which is higher than Metzias Nimtza, or is it even higher than that? Because it combines built-in Metzias Nimtza and Metzias Nimtza as one. You know, I don't want to go over anybody's head here, but, you know, that's a big question.
Built-in Metzias Nimtza. What is higher than that?
The higher than that is that built-in Metzias Nimtza decided to create Metzias Nimtza. You could argue that that's the fact that the Eibishter can create a Metzias Nimtza, and it's a real Metzias, not an illusion.
And that's a kavanah.
Listen, what I just said is completely from myself. I never saw a mimer or a sikha talk about it. Something I think about. Because in a way, you could say it's coming from a place. In fact, the Eibishter, in Metzias Nimtza, we could have built a Metzias Nimtza in a way that's deeper than built a Metzias Nimtza alone. Or you could say, no, built a Metzias Nimtza is this highest level that equalizes everything. And then in Metzias Nimtza, you have Klal and Prat and so on. I have a lot to say on this topic. That's why
I think the
that sounds
second
more
thing that you
correct.
said is the correct thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you, but it's open for conversation. That's all I'm saying. I didn't say that's not the case, but I would wait before we go there. I could tell you, trust me, I think about this all the time. So
Yeah.
I will go there. It's just that here I'm waiting to see more more hints, so to speak, more signposts. When Mittler Rebbe tells us more aces, and then we can go back and just try to, as much as possible, figure out which levels are which and what's going on. Because even here, is Hamashpili Lira is the same level as Hamagbihi Losheves, or is Hamashpili coming down? Because on one hand, he says Hamashpili, he said before, why are there two terms? It's all one. And he said, because the chiddush is that it comes down below. Remember, he asked that question, and he's going to ask it again shortly. He asked the question earlier, why is it, if Hamagbihi and Hamashpili are both one in Atzmus, why are there two psukim? Why here? He asked it right here. Lama Omar Hamagbihi Losheves, Acher Shel Atzmi is Baruch is higher than Emekreim Beis Days. Eich Shaykh Lem Loshen Hagba L'Maylev Hashpal L'Mata Klal. So the fact that you're saying Hamagbihi and Hamashpili, even though we're saying they're one, is clearly a chiddush, because you're saying even in Ashtalshlus, even in existence, where they are two tracks, they're really one because of Atzmus. So there's a lot going on here that we need to still unpack. We'll get there.
Would you agree that, I mean, this discussion, I mean, there's a lot of issues going on here in the past 5 minutes, but this idea of whether it's really two different levels or one level, and where does Klali end and Prat begins, it's not just academic, because if we can get to the source, if you will, or the place where these things meet, if you will, or where they're the same and understand, then we can, in our own world, in our own, from the microcosm, develop a worldview where we too can hopefully begin to see everything as one integrated reality. Now, of course, that's what a lot of we're talking about right now is exactly that issue. But if we can climb into the place where the Eibishter sort of makes that happen, then of course we can.
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah. No. Because I started my question out saying it was technical, but it really isn't. It's actually quite important.
Your question to me is not the same thing I'm talking about now. Your question to me is just that God created. Like in anything, there's a klal and a prat. Everything has a klal and a prat. And as I said, it's throughout Ashtalshlus here. We're talking here how it becomes one in Atzmus is what we're discussing here.
I understand.
Let's just finish the paragraph, hopefully. So we're on line. So let's continue reading. Now comes a parentheses. I see two parentheses. No, because we started parentheses. Yeah. Here comes another parentheses. I think the first parentheses we just began, bottom of last page, ends right here. And then comes a second parentheses. I probably put it right here. So now he's going to give an example for this integration. V'zehu kedimyan sheba odom. Kedimyan. Sometimes the word is dugma, an example. Dimyan is even farther than a dugma. Dimyan means, I know dimyan could be a delusion. The dimyan can be like an illusion or a delusion. But dimyan is
imagination.
Daima is a comparison. It's comparable. Kedimyan sheba odom. Like we can imagine it and find an example for this in a person, be yediyah haklolis. Now, when a person has a yediyah haklolis, a general understanding of something, meaning an idea close, overall understanding. She'idea es atzmei. You know ourselves. You're intimately familiar with yourself, and yedei idea shechutz memenu gam kein bechlal ubefrat ke'echad mamish. So let me explain what he's saying here. The question is, the discussion here is, what is awareness exactly? You know, when I'm aware of you, or I'm aware of things around me, objects around me, is it the same thing as being aware of yourself? So clearly, it's not exactly. Because when you're with yourself, even if there's no one else in the room, even if there's no object in the room, if there's such a thing possible, there's always something, air or whatever. But there is the concept of you being completely immersed in your own thoughts and your own self-awareness, which is why you see a person can be completely absorbed by whatever feelings or thoughts that they have and be oblivious to events around them. And then there's their awareness of things around them. And that is also a klal naprat, because you could be aware b'chlolus, and you could be aware of details, as we see. So I think what he's saying here is they wants to find an example where everything is equal, even in our perspective. Obviously, we can't compare to the Eibishter, to Atzmus, but some dimyon, that's what he's looking for, Shabadim. And I'll read it again inside. V'zeu kedimyon sheba'odam, b'yediyah ha'klolis, she'yedei es atzmei. Let me just read it. Let me read that close. Yedei es atzmei. Yedei yediyah shechutz memenu gam kein b'chal b'frat ke'echad mamish. So I'm not so clear how you're supposed to read this line, to be honest. I think I understand the Havana. I'm not sure how the structure of this sentence is supposed to read. So what's he talking about? Yediyah klosh yedei es atzmei. As he knows himself, yedei yediyah shechutz memenu gam kein b'chal b'frat. He knows also that which is outside of him in general and in detail. Ke'echad mamish, mamish like one. Let's read on. Maybe I'll read the whole paragraph. I'll read till the end of the paragraph, rather. Like the Rambam writes, he's talking about the Eibishter. The gam sheyediyas atzmin nivdelas be'erech miyediyas shemispashet memenu l'chutz, that even though knowing yourself is separate from and different, distinguished from the idea, from knowing something that extends outside of yourself. In other words, knowing yourself is not the same as knowing something outside of yourself. Makom mokim, ve'oisi yediyah ha'atzmis, she'yediyah b'chlal b'frat shaboy ke'echad, shehu kamoi berotzen shaloi, ad ha'maisen nimshach mizeh b'yediyah shechutz memenu kamoi berotzen livneis binyan or kahai gavna. So let me translate what he just said. That even though it's two different types of yediyah, that which is outside of you and that which is knowing your self-awareness, nevertheless, that very yediyah atzmis, which he knows b'chlal b'frat within himself, is like one, and that extends also in that which he knows outside of him. In other words, the way you know the world around you is not the way the world knows itself around itself. When you look at a world around you, you look at people, you look at objects, how do you know them? You know them like you know yourself. You're taking it in, even though it's not exactly the same thing. Self-awareness is not the awareness of the table. But the way you are aware of the table, it's how you are aware, not like someone else may be aware of it. I think that's what he's saying here. That example you have for this is that a person, our consciousness, our awareness also encompasses details outside of us, but is also included within us like it's all one yediyah. So in other words, when you walk into a room and you see people there, we're sitting now in this class and we're learning together. So yes, there are people and there are individuals and we all respect each other and so on. But there's something in your yediyah that combines your own self-awareness and the awareness of those around you. And they're all becoming part of one picture, the picture of your life right now. So you adjust, of course, because you're talking to other people. Whereas if you adjust with yourself, you may behave in a more in an uninhibited way. But it's still, there's a certain component in your awareness where everything is part of like you adjust. You come into a room you walk around the table, you don't bump into a chair. So you're basically taking all the coordinates and creating one picture from it. So on one hand, they're all equalized. And that is, I think, is the example he's giving here to explain this type of unification of different perspectives, klal and prat, by understanding the idea outside of us as it becomes part of who we are. I think that's what he's saying. My initial reaction when learning this, I need to read it again. I may be wrong, and I acknowledge that, but that's how I see it. And then he continues, he says, so it's nimshach kamei beratzon shaloi adam maisa, nimshach mezeh b'yediyah shel chutz mimenu. Adam maisa, from ratzon all the way to maisa, and from this is nimshach in the yediyah shel chutz mimenu. Let's say in the building, he wants to build a home. The home is not him; it's outside of you. But in your ratzon, you want that home, so that home becomes, even though it's a prat and a specific detail or a klal, the home, in your ratzon, it all becomes part of one picture, which is basically, in this case, one unity between klal and prat, all seamless type of connection. So from your point of view, the home, even though you need a contractor and you need details and so on, is all part of your desire to have a home. I believe that's what he's saying. But I'm open to hearing a different interpretation or explanation if anybody has one. As I said, I'll go over it again. What I'm bothered by, frankly, is that Rambam does not talk about a human being. He says the exact opposite. We have a yediyah mechutz mimenu. By the Eibishter, yediyah everything as he knows himself, because there's nothing outside of him. And he's bringing the Rambam here as a comparison to us. So I want to just understand that. I have to go back to the Rambam. Because the Rambam, the Eibishter encompasses everything. So how does he know existence? It's like he knows himself, therefore he knows existence. We need to go study existence. Existence is not part of us. Everything around us is outside of us. But it could be the comparisons that once we are aware of it, it becomes part of us. Whereas by the Eibishter, it doesn't become, it's initially that way. That may be the distinction, but he does bring the Rambam. So basically, we have something similar. Once we become aware of something, it all becomes part of our unified reality. Let's put it that way. I think that's what he's saying. If so, it's quite a profound idea and concept. But I'll stop here if anybody wants to comment. Huh?
It's not exactly, but the Eibishter, it's like a one with him. The Rambam is saying, "Ein likach odam lavinoi." By us, as much as you want to say it's becoming part of him, it's not. It's chutz mimenu.
Yeah, but so why is he bringing it here? Because he wants to say in our yediyah, once you become aware, it does become part of. That's what he says. Ke'echad mamash, he says. B'chal b'frat ke'echad mamash. The gam sheyidiyas atzmin nevdelas be'erach miyidiyah shemispashim chutz l'men b'kol ba'is yidiyah atzmin sheyidiyah b'chal b'frat shepayim.
Ba'adam is not yidiyah, it's atzmo efilu. Mistama, he means not that the yidiyah, the idea is chutz mimenu. But Mistama, it's a ba'ifan klali, he feels. It's not the emissary idea, it's atzmo.
Fine, that's exactly what I said. I don't think it's, of course he's not saying that, but there is something, it is a dimion for this concept. He is bringing our eifan ha'yediyah, human yediyah, into the picture, that we have some similarity of seeing it all as one. That's what I'm saying.
I came up with a mashal, maybe this is nuts, but like, let's say when you're swimming, it doesn't matter, the pool, the ocean's a better example because it's a vast expanse, and you're going in the ocean and you're getting wet, right? You're going from land to the ocean, and you're observing, I'm wet, and maybe it's cold, maybe it's warm, maybe it feels different ways than air, and you're feeling this against your skin, and that's your own, how you feel yourself. But then you also understand that you're going into the ocean and you're part of one larger picture where you're just this little thing inside the ocean. So you have this perspective that, okay, the water's on my body and I'm wet, but you have this bigger perspective on how I'm immersing myself in this vast body of water. Is that a good mashal?
I have to think
Not
about it.
Yeah.
I have to think about it. I was thinking more the other way around, that when you see the ocean and you adjust to it and everything, ultimately everything becomes part of you. In other words, the ocean is in context of you.
I see.
So it's the unity more through your, because the key thing he wants to say is that the idea is all encompasses both klal and prat. Not so much that you are losing yourself in sight of the whole picture. That's where I would probably
differ a little bit.
different or go in that direction. So it's not so much about you losing yourself in the whole vast sea, but it's more that all the outside ideas you have are becoming part of your coordinates. It's like somewhat like philosophers talk about: is there reality really, or reality is only our perception of reality? Does a tree make a sound if it falls in the forest and nobody hears it, type of thing? In other words, from our perception, all you know is what you perceive. You can't really know whether things exist or not. You know you're perceiving that they exist. But for argument's sake, if somebody put a chip in your head, in your mind, in your brain, and somebody created an illusion or some type of hologram, what do they call it? Hologram? Not hologram, holograph. Forgot already what it's called. They project images and so on, and you could think it happened, it never happened. So I'm not talking now whether existence is an illusion. That's not my point. I'm just trying to say is that there's an aspect of everything becoming part of your, I'm looking right now around the room. I see the books, I see you, I see the table, I see the window. And then I think to myself, 1 second, and I know myself as well. The truth is, it's all becoming part of one experience in a way. Even though I could say these are leaves on a tree and these are books on a shelf. So there's something here about where it all becomes in perception, like one seamless perception. I think that's what he's saying, but let me, I want to read it again and again. I've not seen this mashal anywhere before, Chassidus, but it's interesting. And by all means, let's read it, and who knows, maybe we'll come up with different ways of understanding it. Remember, it has to be a dimion. It has to be a dimion
explanation now would be possible.
Yeah. Remember, it has to be a dimion for what we're learning here. It's not just Stam is coming to say an idea. It has to be, he says, and also he brought it after the Hamagbihi. Anyway, I'm going to read it a few times. It's fine. Like all Chassidus, you have to sometimes hard of it. You guide them at Sasi to do a little exertion. The thing is that what's troubling me, to be honest, is the Yedea Atzmei. If he said that everything is part of one perception, then that would make that would be like what I'm explaining right now. But what's the Yedea Atzmei? I think that's a very key line here. He knows himself. You know yourself. The Eibishter knows himself, and therefore he knows everything, and it's all part of that one perception. What does that mean? Yedea. Yedea klolish. Yedea atzmi.
Yedea es atzmi.
Yedea es atzmi. Yeah, Yedea es atzmi.
Maybe he doesn't mean the idea like the Eibishter knows. He means that when you're thinking about yourself,
you're self-aware, but why is that relevant? Why is it so self-aware? Why being aware of yourself?
Because Einod Milvado, because everything is godliness. So essentially, everything that exists is part of God's body, if you will.
But we're talking here about the person. We're talking about the person, not about God.
It's a muscle. It's a muscle. It's a muscle. If we could, let's say we're, God forbid, in a burning house, and I don't know, something is burning you, your skin. You feel that, but you also know that you're inside a burning house. No.
Maybe. Okay, fine. As I said, it's open for discussion. We'll. Anybody else wants to weigh in here?
I think this is a pretty profound thing he's saying here, because my gut tells me it relates to bittul. Like, of course, we're not supposed to sort of understand
my
how
gut
God
tells
sees
me,
everything.
and my gut tells me it's not about bittul.
No? I actually think it's about freedom of choice. is
No, I
because
think
the
it's
reason
about
we
it's about how we perceive things. That's what he wants
correct,
to talk about.
but what I'm saying is, as human beings, because we perceive ourselves as an independent entity, that's the reflection of how Hashem is. So we, on a person, like he wouldn't necessarily think, "Oh, something else is giving me life." You think you're alive because you're alive. So that part of it is what creates the independence or the illusion of independence from us from Hashem, and that's basically
What
the
does that
bottom
have to
line
do
of
with
freedom of choice.
what does it have to do with what he's discussing here? He's not discussing anything about our independence from Hashem here. He's not talking about that's not at all the topic here. I don't think that's what he's discussing here.
The reason I said bittul, Rabbi, is because without bittul, you cannot obtain both of these perspectives. If you think you're the center, let's take the opposite of bittul, which is
Yeah, but
extreme
that's not
arrogance.
what I'm saying. But let me just cut you off right here. That's not, he's not coming to talk about how we experience God. He's coming to give an example of perception. That's all he's doing here. This is not an avodah dika parentheses. He's not talking about Yosef now. He's talking about an example in our perception to understand a perception that unites everything. That's all he's coming to say in the parentheses, in my opinion.
Right, but my point is, I don't know that you can come to that perception without bittul.
Okay, and I beg to differ.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I didn't say you can.
It
Of course,
means apathy. Sheidea es atzmoi is like the cloud, but in the cloud there is the prat. But by Yedea es atzmoi, you feel also the idea shechutz mimenu, because this is something higher than both of them. The Yedea es atzmoi means there is something in it that makes him to Yedea es atzmoi, not like with the Eibishter. But there is, that's the whole idea here, that there is something above both of them.
and I'm looking at the Rambam. The Rambam is going to be key here, in my opinion. The Rambam is a ikad here. Kodesh Baruch Hu makir amitai v'yadeya esei k'may shehi. Ve'en yadeya b'deya shehi chutz mimenu k'may she'anu yedim. She'ein anu v'daitei echad, avla beiri is Baruch Hu v'daitei v'chayev echad. M'kol tzad u'm'kol pina, m'kol b'chol derech yichud. שאלמלא היה חי בחיים וידע בדעה חוץ ממנו, היה שם אלוקוס הרבה, הוא וחי ודייתי. ואין הדבר כן אלא אחד מכל צד ומכל פינה.
Where are you reading from?
The Rambam, Hilchos Yesod HaTorah, chapter 2, halacha 10.
Thank you.
Well, it's the Rambam he brings here, which maybe only confuses matters, to be honest, but let's see.
Is there a citation in the mimer?
Yeah, he says, Kamish Kosev Rambam, the fourth line.
I know, but does he have the exact citation?
Down below in the footnote, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think what I said is what I think is correct. It's a chiddush of the Mittler Rebbe. He's saying that even though Hashem is different than us, because Hashem does not know b'yediyah chutz mimenu, and we do, but we have something similar. When we know something, it becomes part of that unified perception. I so far stand by what I explained it before. I just want to make sure I'll read it a few times. But check it out, learn it. Open to
But
every.
this is not because the ideas atzmoy. This is because there is something which is above even ideas atzmoy, which means the inner of ideas atzmoy is creating the cloud and the prat. Ideas atzmoy and ideas shachutz. It's not that he knows himself, the inner part of it.
As I said, let me give it some more thought before I explain further. We'll stop here at the end of the paragraph. By all means, everybody study it.
How did you find the Rambam so quickly?
I know the Rambam. It's a very famous Rambam, and I've learned it many times. It's the Hu Hamada Hu Yedei, chapter 2, chapters 48 in Tanya. It's brought many places.
This is in the law from the Rambam, the 3 Prakim a day.
Yeah, but I'm saying this is one of the most famous Rambams there are. Hu Hamada Hu Yedei Hu Yedua. That expression, you may have heard it before. That's
The
this
Alter Rebbe
Rambam.
in Tanya, Perek Beis, also brings this Rambam.
Yeah, I just said Nagah. Yeah. Not an easy Rambam to figure out. A hard Rambam.
Rambam
And then the
himself is
Rambam
said
adds, if you just want to
that a
really
human
get
being
it,
cannot understand it.
he says, he says like this, he says clearly, the dover zeh, ein koyach bepel lemrei, v'lei be'ezen l'shemei, v'lei belev ha'odam la'akirei al burya. Okay. So I agree. It's not through our Yudea Atzme you know everything. But once we have a Yudea Chutz Mimenu, and it becomes part of us, there's a certain, I would almost go and venture to say, it's like when you look at something, Riyah, not Shmiya. Shmiya, when you listen, it's made up of parts. When you look at a picture, let's say you're looking at my face, what are you seeing? Details or the whole face? The truth, both. You see my eyes, you see my nose, you see my mouth, but you also see an entire face. You're not looking, it's not just a composite, it's not just the sum of the parts. And there you find there's both the klal and the prat all in one. And that's why you recognize me. If you just looked at my eyes or my nose and started separate, dissecting it all, you may not recognize somebody. A face is more than just the sum of the parts. I think that would be an example. I'm not positive, but that sounds to me like something that he's saying. He's not using that example here. He's using it more Yediyah because he wants to speak about Yediyah Klolis, Yediyah Pratis. But it sounds like that. And especially with the example of Berotz and Livnei's Binyan, I think that's also an important hint. But you know what? I'm just processing right now, trying to figure it out. I can't tell you exactly everything. This is what I have so far. I'll let you know. Any other questions? Any other questions? Any? Everybody quiet? And just for the record, the bittul part that you mentioned, Yitzchak, is going to be necessary to understand God. That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to understand God, you need bittul. But this parenthesis is not coming to, it's for that purpose. Here he's coming to give an example in our way of perceiving things, an example for how God perceives. But in the bigger picture, to be in general, of course, the more bittul you have, the more you can integrate God into your life. But the parentheses is not coming to do that per se right now. I mean, ultimately, that's what I'm saying.
I hear you. I was speaking more to the broader general point.
No, that absolutely. But the parentheses is clearly, he wants to give a real life example of perception. That's for sure. That's clear. That's why he's saying this. It's very easy for him to say, like by Yosef before, he could say, when a person is completely Kabbalah sale, completely mevatel, you connect to Hashem. But he wants to give a dimyan. That's what he says, kedimyan sheba adam. Anyway, it's a very interesting parenthesis because also the fact that he's taking it from the Rambam and he's going further and saying that we have the Rambam is coming to actually say that our perception is not like God's perception. That's the Rambam black and white. And here the Mittler Rebbe seems to be saying that there's a dinyan in our Yediyah, even though it's not like God's Yediyah, obviously, but still there's something that we can compare. Just interesting juxtaposition here,
100%. I'm trying to post the Rambam, but I'll have to look for it later. for everybody else.
You have it on Chabad.org. You have an English translation and the Hebrew together. You know, I could post it. I have it right in front of me. Open here. Want me to
That
post
would
it?
be great. Please.
Let me see if I can. The problem is, how do I get it into one page here? It's not.
This is Hilchos Deos.
Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. I have to post it in
Right away
several.
in the beginning. In the beginning.
I have to post it
I
in
think in
several
the first
parts.
parak.
Yeah, Pedig Beis Halacha Yud. I'll post it right now. What are we? Ayin Beis. Why is this taking forever? Okay. I have to post it in several parts. Yeah. How is everybody's Lag Boimer while we're waiting already?
Hashem.
In the parade here in Kranitz was extra
It's
amazing,
very nice.
uplifting.
It was beautiful, right?
Is this the paragraph about Kadosh Baruch Hu Makir Amito Yodea Osa Kmo Shehi Ve'eno Yodea B'Dea Shehi Chutz Mimeno Kmo She'ana Yodin? Is that
That's what I posted. Yeah, I'm posting it right now as we speak.
No, I just found it on Chabad.org.
I posted it on the group already.
Oh, okay, I see. You sure did, didn't you? All right. I'll just put it.
I just posted it on the group.
Thank you.
And the Ayin Beis group.
I saw. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, done. Good. Let me stop here. So we finished the paragraph on top.